Hi friends, my name is Dr. Matt O'Reilly of theologyproject.online, and today we're revisiting the question of whether the Bible forbids women from serving in pastoral ministry. Specifically, we're looking at 1 Timothy chapter 3, verse 2, where Paul provides qualifications for elders and says that elders should be the husband of one wife. Before we dig into these texts, take a quick second to give this video a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe to Theology Project here on YouTube and tap the bell so that you get notifications when new videos are posted. A little bit of backstory for you. Not long ago, the question of women in ministry, and specifically women in pastoral ministry, was revived quite vigorously when Rick Warren and Saddleback Church ordained 3 women to pastoral ministry. Created a conflict because Saddleback is affiliated with the Southern Baptist Convention, which officially says women should not serve in ministry. After that, with all the questions floating around, I decided to make a quick video looking at some of the common controversial texts, 1 Corinthians 11 through 14 and 1 Timothy 2. Check out a link in the description for that video. And several people responded in the comments and on social media, hey, doesn't 1 Timothy 3:2 simply say that an elder should be a one-woman man or the husband of one wife? And since the question was raised in response to that video, we're going to take the time today to look at 1 Timothy 3:2 and ask whether or not Paul's language there forbids women from serving in pastoral ministry roles. So 1 Timothy chapter 3, verse 2, Paul is providing Timothy some instruction for the qualifications of pastors or elders, as the text puts it. And he says that elders should be the husband of one wife. Different translations render this differently. Sometimes it's more in the sense of faithful to the spouse. Sometimes it's the literal husband of one wife. The question is, what does Paul mean by husband of one wife? Does that phrase mean a married male and that exclusively? Or does it mean more generally a person who is faithful to his or her spouse? The context is helpful because Paul uses the exact same phrase just 10 verses later in 1 Timothy 3:12, where he's talking about qualifications for deacons. And he says the same thing about deacons, that deacons should be the husband of one wife. And the Greek phrase is identical. Same phrase. The question then becomes, if elders are supposed to be husband of one wife and deacons are supposed to be husband of one wife, is there evidence in the New Testament that women ever held either of those offices? And the answer is yes. There is very clear, very explicit evidence in the New Testament that women held one of those offices. And that evidence comes to us in Romans chapter 16. In Romans chapter 16, verse 1, Paul commends a woman named Phoebe, who's probably carrying the letter of Romans on his behalf and might have been the first person to explain or answer questions about Romans when it arrived. But Paul commends Phoebe as a deacon. So we have in Romans 16:1 a woman who is a deacon. If we set that alongside 1 Timothy 3:12 and ask, how do these qualifications of a deacon apply to Phoebe? In what sense might she be husband of one wife? Then we can quickly and quite easily see that the language husband of one wife should be translated, should be interpreted something like a man or woman faithful to his or her spouse, or a person faithful to his or her spouse. A deacon should be a person faithful to his or her spouse if he or she is married. So if that's what the phrase husband of one wife means, a person faithful to his or her spouse and not a married male exclusively, if that's what the phrase means, then we should interpret it consistently in 1 Timothy 3:2 and 1 Timothy 3:12. So if deacons are supposed to be a person who is faithful to his or her spouse, then elders husband of one wife, that also means elders should be a person faithful to his or her spouse, whichever the case may be. Elders, husband of one wife. Deacons, husband of one wife. Phoebe is a deacon. That means that husband of one wife should not be interpreted as a married male exclusively, but as a person who is faithful to his or her spouse, both in 1 Timothy 3:12 and in 1 Timothy 3:2. Deacons and elders. Now someone will object, well, if that's what Paul meant, a person faithful to his or her spouse, why didn't he say it that way? Why didn't he frame it that way? And this is a place where we have to remember that Paul is living in the first century. The first century Roman Empire is patriarchal. It is male-oriented, and you expect the average person to speak in male-oriented language. It was common for Paul and others in the first century to use male-oriented language in ways that did not necessarily exclude women. For example, in 1 Corinthians, Paul addresses his audience as brothers, but he also includes instructions for women. So clearly, by using a masculine term or a male-oriented term, he is not excluding women from the audience of the letter. That's typical, that's normal. And if we see that in Paul as a tendency, we shouldn't be surprised if in 1 Timothy we hear male-oriented language, but male-oriented language that is not necessarily exclusive of women, which is precisely what I'm arguing we find in 1 Timothy 3:2 and 1 Timothy 3:12. Hey, thanks for watching this video. Hope you found it helpful. If you did, give it a thumbs up. Be sure to subscribe and share it with your friends on social media. See you next time.